Alright, fellow Bible enjoyers, welcome to the third episode of my German course, Learning German with Bible. In today's video, we'll be looking at Genesis 1 verses 3 to 5. I hope you're ready. Our first verse today is Genesis 1 verse 3. I read it to you first in German and then in English. Und Gott sprach, es werde Licht. Und es wurde Licht. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. The first word what I'd like to draw your attention to is sprach, or said in English. Now, if it seems a little familiar to you, that's because it is. Because the German word sprach, or sprechen, from which it is derived, is related to the English word speak, or spoke. Both words in turn are derived from the Proto-Germanic word sprechana, sprechana. Sprechana in turn is derived from the Proto-Indo-European word spreg, spreg, which can for example be found in Albanian as sprej, Old Norse spraka, or Lithuanian spragu. Next, let's take a look at the words werde and wurde, which are hard to translate into English because they don't really have an equivalent. Werden means something like to become. Wurde is the past form of this verb and means became. You could also translate them as to turn into or to transform. In this case, it means to come into existence, because there's not really something that transforms into light when God commands there to be light. It just comes into existence. This is a somewhat archaic idiom. It's not really used in modern texts. It only really occurs in the Bible. Werden is in turn derived from the Proto-Germanic word Vervana. Vervana in turn is derived from the Proto-Indo-European word werd, werd, which can be found in various languages. For example, in the Sanskrit word vartate, which means to turn, to roll, or to be. In Russian, vertet, which also means to turn. In the English word weird, which means strange or unusual. In the Persian word gerd, which means round, or in Latin vertigo, which means dizziness. So if you look at it, most of these words are somehow related to roundness, to rolling or spinning. Even in English there's the word to turn into, which could also be equivalent to become or werden. I find this quite interesting to look at, honestly. Finally, we have the most important word of the verse, Licht, or light. Licht, as you might have already guessed, is related to the English word light. In fact, in the past, the letters GH in English would have been pronounced like the German ch. So, for example, Shakespeare wouldn't have said light, he would have said leicht, or Licht even. Both of these words are derived from the Proto-Indo-European word loiter, loiter, which means light in many other Indo-European languages. For example, Sanskrit rokate, Latin lux, Greek loika, Armenian lois, Iranian luxos, or Russian luch. In all these languages, it means light, or a ray, or beam, or something like that. In Iranian, it means the moon. Next, let's take a look at Genesis 1, verse 4. Und Gott sah, dass das Licht gut war. Da schied Gott das Licht von der Finsternis. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. First, let's take a look at the word sah, or saw. Now again, this would be quite obvious to anyone paying attention. Saw and sah are obviously related, both referring to sight. Gut is a very prominent German word, and it's easy to remember for English-speaking people because it's almost pronounced the same as good. Gut, good. You can see how they are related. Next, let's take a look at the word schied, schied, which is derived from the word scheiden, which means to separate. In German, a divorce, for example, is called a Scheidung. Next, let's take a look at this word, das. It looks similar to the das that appears behind it, but it's actually different because it's written with two S's. So, what does that mean? Das with a double S is always used in relative sentences in German, where it has the same function as the English that. Gott saw that the light was good. Gott sah, dass das Licht gut war. Whenever you see a das written with a double S, you know that it is a relative sentence, because the das with a double S only occurs to indicate relative sentences. Next, let's take a look at next verse, Genesis 1, verse 5. Und Gott nannte das Licht Tag, und die Finsternis nannte er Nacht. Und es wurde Abend, und es wurde Morgen, der erste Tag. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. Let's start with the word Tag, because that's the easiest word for you to recognize. Tag means day in English. Now you might have noticed that there's a pattern occurring here. Often, when there's a German word that ends with a G, there's also a corresponding English word that ends with a Y. For example, Tag, which corresponds to the English word day. Both start with a D or T sound, and they end with J or Y. So, when you look at German words, one pattern that you can often recognize is that when a German word ends with a J, there's often a familiar English word that ends with a Y. Now let's take a look at the verb nannte. Nannte, which means named, or call, or to give it a name. Nannte. If you look at it, you might notice that it's somewhat familiar to the English word name, and indeed, in German, the word name, Name, also exists. If you wanted to be creative in your translation, you could also say, God named the light day. In German, the word nennen, which is the base form from which the past form nannte derives, always refers to the act of giving something a name. So in this context, it is more precise to say nannte. Next, let's take a look at the word Nacht, or night, as it would mean in English. Now, here I would like you to remember the word light, or Licht, which we discussed earlier, and try to see if you notice another pattern here. The word night also contains this construction of letters G and H, as does the word Nacht. So, what I want you to notice is that in English there are many words that have this somewhat archaic construction G and H in them, and in German many words have a construction of CH, which in German corresponds to a ch sound. So whenever you see a word that contains the letters G and H in English, you can be sure that there's probably a German word related to it that contains the letters C and H and the ch sound. Next, let's take a look at the word Abend. Abend means evening in English, and I don't have any further comment about it. The word Morgen should be more familiar to you, because it means morning in English. Alright, and that's it for this week. Thank you very much for watching, and I'm looking forward to see you again next week. Have a great time. See you.